So I'm not going to do a magic trick. It requires hand-eye coordination, which is something that I've not been gifted with. But I want to start out and tell you guys a story about somebody who could do magic, and I'm sure most, if not all of you, have heard about him. There's a guy named Houdini. So he was back. He was an old long time ago. He used to be like the greatest magician ever until David Copperfield came along. And he would show up with this traveling show in these towns, and just to kind of generate some buzz, generate some publicity, he would go to the local jailer, and he would challenge him to lock him in the jail cell, and he would bet him $1,000 that he could get out in an hour. And so the story goes, and with Houdini, it's, you know, myth, legend, whatever it is, don't Snopes this, but the story goes that this one town he went to, and so he challenged the jailer. They locked him up in the jail cell, and he spent that hour, and he tried everything he could try, and he tried all his tricks, everything, but he couldn't get out. He had failed, and so the hour went by, and he just collapsed in the middle of the jail cell, and was just done, and he had failed. Have any of you guys ever felt like that? You know, I know I have, and it used to be that for me, there used to be this thing that I would always go back to, that I knew it was shameful, that I knew it wasn't right, that I just kept doing, though, that I couldn't stop with. You know, and I would try so hard not to do it, and then I would fail, and I felt like Houdini. Felt like I was sitting in a jail cell. I had no freedom to say no, no freedom to move out of it, and I was a prisoner. Now, if you guys, can you guys identify with that? You know, that there's that thing. You know, and you know it's not right. You know, you'd even classify it maybe as sin. Maybe something that you know separates you from God, moves you away from God when you do it. But yet, you just keep going back to it. You know, and maybe that thing is for a lot of us, you know, the first thing our minds go to is a sectional thing, porn, you know, the internet, whatever it is, fantasies. You know, for some of you guys, maybe it's anger, maybe it's a bitterness, maybe it's, you know, unforgiveness. You know, that relationship that you just keep going back to, you shouldn't, or that you just keep going into, that just ends up ugly. Or maybe it's just looking back at your past and just saying, you know, look at all where I've been, and look what I wasted my life on, and I just can't let that go. I just can't forgive myself for that. And you know, it's hard because we go there, and I think we have a tendency to get stuck there. And we'll go there, and you know, you pray about it, and you say, God, forgive me of this, I want to move past it. And you know, maybe it's good, but you keep coming back to it. And you just, at the end of the day, you realize that no matter, you've done everything you can do, no matter how hard you tried, and it's like, I'm sitting in that jail cell. I'm sitting there, I've tried everything I know how to do, and it hasn't worked. So for me, that thing for me was what led me to become a Christ follower. Because I was in these groups. Actually, it was a Saturday morning or Monday night, I can't remember which. I heard Steve Collins talk about it, and then a couple weeks later, I heard Todd talk about it, and they talked about this junk and their thing, and how they were getting freedom from it. And I could see in their eyes, I could see in their face that they had freedom, and I wanted that. So I found myself in a room with a group of guys trying to emulate what they had to move into this idea of freedom. And the first thing that I came up against was this idea that, for me, personally, it started to start with control of, I had never understood what it meant to give my life to Christ, to surrender control of my life to Christ. And so I did that. That was the first thing that had to go. And I talked about that up in church. I've talked about it here before. But tonight, what I want to talk about is the other part of that, the reason that I was in that room. And for me, my thing was I looked at internet pornography. You know, I looked at it, I acted on it. You know, I'd come home every Friday, and I'd get home. I got off work at about noon on Friday. I'd come home, I'd get online, I'd look, end up usually masturbating, and then just at that moment, just feeling so guilty and knowing that what I'd just done was wrong, and that I'd screwed up again. And so then I'd take a shower, go out in the yard, work out, just try to sweat it out and just punish my body for it. And eventually I just worked myself to the point where I was like, okay, God, I screwed up again. I'm sorry. I confess. Forgive me. You know, but the problem was that somewhere deep down I knew that the next Friday I'd be struggling with the same thing. And I'd go back and I'd do the same thing over and over and over. And I just felt like I was in this cycle. And some Fridays, you know, it'd be better. And, you know, go a week or two and it'd be good. But eventually I always came back to that point of failure. And so then I heard about these guys, and I saw that they were getting freedom, and they had the same story, that cycle of failure, and they'd broken it. And I looked at them, and I could tell they'd broken it wide open. And I wanted that. And so I got in this room with these guys, and I knew up here that Jesus had the power to give me freedom, and I knew this, right? But it was up here. I never applied it, never made it real for me. And so I learned a couple things about what it looks like to move into that freedom. And the first was the control part of it. You know, like I said, for me it was letting go of control. It was letting go of complete control of my life, surrendering my life to Christ. But then there was also an aspect of letting go of control of what I thought it looked like to move into freedom. Because I had some ideas of what I thought it should look like. And I had to realize that those ideas, unless they were checked out with the Bible and what Jesus talked about, with his path to it, that I had to let those go too. And so what does the Bible say about it? And so this morning, I want to give you guys what I found, the principle I found that's the first step to step into this freedom. And it comes out of James, and it's one we've heard before. But it's therefore confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous man is powerful and effective. I don't know about you guys. I grew up in church. I heard that a lot. But there is this idea all of a sudden of this idea of each other, of somebody else, that plays a part in this being healed, of moving in towards freedom. And honestly, for me, I don't understand that, because outside of church world, right, in where my job and everywhere else, my whole upbringing is, if I have a problem, I fix it. Now, I should be independent enough that if I've got an issue, that I should be able to deal with it and fix it, and I don't need somebody else to come in and help me. And even I think the way that I was trying to surrender it to Jesus was just between me and Him. You know, there was none of this, none of the each other part of it. But the place that the first step that Jesus gives us is this idea that there's this each other part of it, that we have a part to play in helping each other move towards freedom. And so I was in that room with these guys, and I knew, because I wanted that freedom, and I knew that there still has to be this part of it where I surrender, I confess my sins, I ask for forgiveness. It's still a personal thing. But there was this choice before me of, you know, I just became a Christ follower, and here's this each other thing. I mean, the stuff that I did, I didn't want to talk about, you know, especially because some of the stuff that I'd seen online, the stuff I'd looked at, I'd tried to translate that and experiment with that with my wife.